Martha Gellhorn said that we should be a walking tape recorder with eyes. I think she might have said a video recorder or something, if it was in the modern day, something like that. But basically what she means is to be documenting everything. So taking notes, taking close notes, jotting down impressions, ultimately fact-checking as you go, because it's not like here where your editor can call the people that you've talked to and do the fact check. You need to do that as you go. And also you want to tell it fresh. So the more that you can document while you're in the moment, the more telling details you'll see, the more stories, the more anecdotes that will act as metaphors in your story. What distinguishes immersive journalism from other types is both the proximity to the people that you're writing about or covering, and the time that you take with them. There's a big difference between talking to someone once, spending an hour with them, and spending days or even weeks with them. And particularly in complex cultures, and where you may have a lot of preconceived notions, going in and spending the time to unravel the complexities of that culture is essential. And also to gain trust, to go deeper with people. There's no substitute for time and immersion. A lot of my energy is focused on three things: protecting myself, protecting my data, and protecting others. All of these things are interconnected. So what I do generally is I try to email as much data as I can back to myself, to another account, emailing contact lists, keeping contact lists separate from notes. So when I'm interviewing someone, not putting their name necessarily at the top of my notes in case my notebook is taken. Being careful about how I mark my tapes when I'm recording, being careful that I don't use people's full names if I'm concerned about their safety, but putting their name somewhere else so I know who I'm talking about. So I do a lot of emailing of transcripts and so on. And then, especially when you're going to checkpoints, border crossings, always going meticulously through all of my belongings to make sure that people who have given me their business cards or given me information, that it's not either that I can send that information to myself and then get rid of that paper trail, or make sure that it's concealed in some way. You don't want to cause trouble to yourself and others, and this is the most important part. It's protecting your subjects, and especially in hostile places, you don't know what exactly you're leaving them with. So you may think, well, of course you're being honest. Of course that's the first rule is to be truthful in what you're portraying. But in doing so, you may put people at risk. They may have been honest with you without knowing the consequences of being candid with the journalist. They may not understand that what you're writing could be read around the world right now. And particularly with the Iraqi refugees, since most of them had left with direct threats to their life, there are, in Syria and in the areas where the refugees are, there are Iraqi militia members who have been photographing them so that if they leave and have to go back to Baghdad or elsewhere, if they have to sell their belongings or do business or something, they often find that they're met by armed men at their homes. So this kind of record, even my concern about photographing them, and is that the wrong people are going to be able to find them. And also they don't know what their situation is, because right now they're living in limbo. Who knows if and when they might be forced back into the situation in Iraq. Sometimes I change names. I don't change details, but I often omit details. And it can be very frustrating as a writer when you have beautiful details to leave them out. But that's a decision that I have to grapple with on where people's lives are concerned. The final, I guess, piece of advice that I have is that no one's going to make you into a foreign correspondent. As I've said, foreign bureaus are shrinking. It's just really not happening anymore, especially doing long-term work, investigative work. We're seeing very little investigative journalism of any kind anymore. And so you have to do it yourself. You have to get on the plane and decide where you're going to go, and then go. Kapuscinski said that our trade requires passion, curiosity about the world and people, an appetite for information, diligence, and devotion. And in our profession, I think the greatest danger is to miss the story. So prepare yourself well and then go. Thank you. Well, I started my freelance writing career here at UBC, and I've always worked and gone to school, and I also studied abroad. When I was 19, I moved to Paris, and then when I was 20, I went to Tel Aviv University and did Middle Eastern Studies. So I was always really interested in seeing the world, but doing it while I was studying, and so I was actually living in a place. I was never really much for the backpacking kind of travel. I was very interested in, even then, in a kind of immersive experience where I was educating myself. And then when I was at UBC, actually, I finished my undergrad in '98, but I did my master's and finished that in 2002. And all of that time, I was selling, all through my graduate studies, I was really started selling my work. And this was local work. I'm not talking about going overseas right away, but which is something that I had done, and my studies encompassed a lot more than journalism or writing. But I started selling the work that I was doing, and there's a great opportunity to work with this kind of mindset in our immediate surroundings. I mean, there are all kinds of foreign countries here in Vancouver, places that we don't know, the cultures that we haven't explored, and that are fascinating. And so I think that a lot of my work was already in that vein of going inside those kinds of cultures. And then I was freelancing to newspapers, to radio, magazines, and finding that yes, this is possible to do this, and learning, of course, how the business works and how to negotiate rates. And then I decided that I needed to go abroad, and no one's going to fund you, by the way, at the beginning. It's just not going to happen. So you have to just, that was my last piece of advice, you have to just go and do it. And I had already studied at Tel Aviv University. I knew a lot about Israel and the Palestinian conflict, and yet I knew and I didn't know at the same time. I mean, I learned things and there were things left out of my lessons. And I was very interested in seeing the other side, the things that weren't being shown on the television news. And that's really what drove me. Always curiosity, and finding things out. But I had a basis, so it wasn't like I was completely going in fresh. Initially, I just went to Syria in August, July, August, really. And I flew straight into Syria, and you have to get a visa. And you should be careful about how you apply for it. Because they're kind of restrictive, but at the same time they want tourists, they want people to come in. So I got a Syria visa and I flew from London to Damascus. But then when I went in December, again, I decided to go, I wanted to go to Jordan because I knew Syria really well in terms of the refugee crisis. I mean, I knew the contours of it. And I wanted to see how was life different for Iraqis who had gone to Jordan. Most of the wealthier Iraqis had gone to Jordan, but they were also living much more distributed lives. A lot of them lived in hiding, they didn't know their neighbors, whereas in Syria they lived much more out in the open because Syria was openly tolerating them and giving them visas, 3-month residency permits. So you can get a visa at the airport in Jordan, you just fly in, it's an American ally, so I mean, the only resource Jordan has is its relationship to the US. It's like it's a desert, that's it. No oil, nothing. But you can go in and get a visa easily. But Syria, I had to apply for ahead of time. And then Lebanon is, again, it's so far a US ally. And so you can just get one when you cross. I think that my skills have really increased. I don't think that I've changed the type of work that I'm doing, but obviously the level of knowledge that I have has expanded because I've been looking at a lot of other countries. I'm looking at the Arab world, the Muslim world generally.